Hello and welcome. I'm glad you could be here with me. This is Mark Emery. This is the first boot camp, if you will, in our series, the PT series, Acquiring the PT Lifestyle. We've got a lot to cover, so let's jump right into it. All right, what we're going to cover today, just to give you a little heads up in advance, what you can expect, we're going to go over some of the basics of the PT concept. And if you're already familiar with that, don't worry, we'll get through this quickly and get really into the heart of the matter with a lot of specifics, all right? So we're going to jump right into how I handle myself in initial contact scenarios. And by that, I'm talking not about aliens, but about dealing with police. Okay, so roadside stops, that type of thing, all right? So I'll give you a few actionable items right there. We're going to talk about who you are legally speaking. Just about every presentation that I do, this is a point that keeps coming up, doesn't it? You've seen, we talked about this in the Escape from the Matrix webinar, and the fact is this is a very important issue. So here we're going to dig into legal specifics, the legal foundation as to really who you are and who you are perceived to be. And there are a couple different options for you. All right, so we're going to get into that. It's important to understand jurisdiction and how the system, how the government gets their hooks into you, right? So we have to take a look at that. And only in understanding how they put those hooks into you can you then have a chance to get them taken out, right? And to be free from that. So that's important. We're going to look at how everything is regulated commerce and how everything is relegated into the commercial realm. That's how government regulates everything. Commerce is a regulated activity. And so what they do is they trick you into commerce so that even when you bring grandma to church, that's a commercial activity and subject to regulation. And of course, when things are regulated, they can exact fees and permits and licenses, all these things that you have to pay for just to do those things, right? So we're going to get into that. The power of words and presumptions. You know, I want to say this is one of the most important aspects of what we're going to talk about today, because it is. But the problem with saying that is that everything we talk about here is so important. It's hard to pick just one. But this is where you can convert knowledge into wisdom when you understand the power of words and how you can use presumptions in your favor, where in fact people can actually deceive themselves while you're telling the truth. We'll get into that. That's really powerful. All right, we'll talk about certificates of title and registration and the tricks that are used there. Things are not what you have been told to believe. Can you imagine that? And what you're going to learn on that, if you don't know already, is it's very powerful. All right, so from there we're going to go moving into how to shift from the commercial realm to the private side. And to convey this, I'm going to show you a couple of examples, what I've done myself personally. Everything we're talking about here are things that I have firsthand personal experience with, okay? So none of this is textbook theory, all right? This is practical application of what I have done, what I'm doing, and what has worked for me. So here we're going to get into the driver's license issue and see what the law requires there and what is the fundamental reality of the driver's license and how we can manage that situation. And then we're going to get into a checklist to freedom. This checklist is going to contain a number of actionable items that we're going to go over very quickly. But this will complete really the things that you need to do to be able to achieve true freedom and to move into a different sandbox that operates by different rules. Okay, you with me on that? So from there, finally, we're going to get into a brief discussion on the advanced international PT and what that means, talking about the five flag theory. All right, so So this is what we're going to be talking about today, and it's some good stuff. We got some good stuff lined up for you, so let's jump right into it. All right. All right, we're going to be talking about legal issues, and I have to put this disclaimer out. All right. First of all, you should know I am not an attorney. I'm not licensed at law. And this presentation is really my own personal research and my personal experiences. This is my story. It shouldn't be construed as legal advice in any way, shape, or form. So don't try to duplicate my experiences without thoroughly researching your own local laws and getting the best legal advice possible. All right? You have to understand there is risk in everything these days. There is risk in doing nothing and just sitting at home. You understand that? Okay, there's risk in doing everything. So there is no magic wand you can wave to eliminate risk. So you've got to understand that. So by proceeding further in this presentation, you assume all personal responsibility for your actions from this point forward. All right, so you have to understand this presentation is not a complete analysis of all the issues raised, and the information contained may not be 100% accurate or current. As you know, the statutes are constantly changing, they're updated and revised, and they do vary from state to state. However, there is a high level of uniformity between the states, and you can pretty well make the presumption that things are fairly standard from one state to the next. All right, so this information is for entertainment and informational purposes, and it's intended only to be a guide for your further study. All right, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you what I've learned, what I've done, and you take that and take it from there. Do your own study and see how you want to deal with it. All right. So, having said that, getting into the basic concepts of a PT. What is a PT? There's a number of acronyms we can use. The Perpetual Traveller. You appear as though that you're always on the move. You don't really belong anywhere. All right, you're always from somewhere else, and that kind of fits along with the idea of being a permanent tourist. Every country in the world rolls out the red carpet for tourists. They invite the tourists, they welcome tourists, they protect the tourists, they give them special treatment. And just look at the immigration issue in the United States. The illegal aliens are getting put up in posh hotels, big screen TVs. They're giving them cell phones. They're giving them spending cash. What do they do for the locals? What do they do for the veterans? What do they do for the people that are struggling to survive, the homeless? All right. So tourists get special treatment. So why not try to be in a position where you're always looking like you're a tourist? You're prepared thoroughly. A PT understands many issues that the average local does not, and is prepared for a variety of circumstances and is ready, so come what may, right? Previous taxpayer is a very interesting thought, and is very powerful as this leads directly to prosperity, right? You keep what you make and don't have to give it all away. That's very important. And freedom, having the cash flow. We're going to talk about being a perennial tycoon. That speaks for itself. Who does private transactions with people of talent? So PT can stand for a lot of things. And in this context, all of these terms have very specific benefits, and these are the benefits that we're striving to achieve in acquiring the PT status, right? So that's our motivation. That's where we're headed. So the objectives really are to fly under the radar. So you're less detected. You're not a target. You remove yourself from being a target or being in harm's way. It's important to be able to achieve a certain level of invisibility. And what does that mean? No, you're not going to be physically invisible. But rather than standing up in a crowd where people say, hey, there he is, get him, you can be in the back of the crowd and totally unnoticed. And when things get ugly, you simply sneak out the back door and disappear. All right? So the idea is just to stay out of harm's way, to live a life of peace and tranquility. Okay? So wherever you are, you appear to be from somewhere else. Why is that important? Because it's the locals that get fleeced. It's the locals that get abused. It's the locals that have the draconian control mechanisms that are put on them, not the tourists, right? So you could be at home. If you appear as a tourist from somewhere else, you have special benefits that you don't have as a local. All right, you with me? So that's important. We have to learn to be a pauper on paper. In other words, we don't own anything. You know, we're paupers. If you get hauled in by the scruff of your neck by the sheriff's deputy and the judge forces you to fill out a financial statement because they're going after you and they want your stuff and they want to know where it is, you can fill out truthfully, well, I've got a couple of old shirts, I got a used pickup truck, and I've got an old dog. What do you want? Okay, so they can't take from you what you don't have. We've talked about this. Doesn't mean you're going to live like a pauper. You can still live like a king. And so there's just a certain amount of positioning that goes with that. Structuring your business and your affairs in such a way that you can live like a king and yet not have anything to be taken from you. Okay? So those are some of the key objectives that we want to deal with. And so why is this important? You know, there's a number of reasons. And we have to understand that, you know, you've got under these new terms and conditions that you'd be living under as a PT, you've got a lot fewer restrictions, controls, or intrusions. And really, government or other threats, people that want to sue you, they just lose interest. And they don't have control when you've got a foreign address. You're no longer on the voting rolls. They can't really point to anything that designates you as a resident or a citizen. You're not on the property tax rolls. You don't have any credit reports. They can't follow you around, see your business. They can't monitor your local bank account, track your income, seize your property, browbeat your employer into stealing your wages. These are things that typically happen on a daily basis. And it's getting worse. And honestly, I have to say that the window of opportunity to do something about it is rapidly closing. We can see an increase in the control mechanisms. The walls are going up. Tyranny is coming down. And the cabal and the New World Order is rapidly implementing their plan to put everybody in a pen. So my advice is to understand that our time is short and it's time to do something. So as a PT, you're going to pay a lot less taxes, all right? When you can live and manage your affairs freely in jurisdictions which have different rules, okay, not all places have the same tax regimen, all right? So we have to expand our thinking and start thinking outside of the box, outside of your little local area. Most of us live in a certain area. Maybe we even grow up in that same area, and that's the center of our universe. That's as far as we think. All right, we've got to go beyond that, start seeing the big picture. As a PT, you're going to have fewer lawsuits and harassments. All right, who's going to go to the expense of hiring an attorney and going after you for some stupid thing, some harassment, nonsensical, non-justified lawsuit, which go on all the time? You think, well, no one's going to sue me. I'm a good guy. I get along with everybody. Baloney. People today have an entitlement attitude, and if they think you have money, guess what? They're going to try to steal it from you. And they'll use the courts and attorneys to do so. You've seen the ads on TV. Well, if you've been unjustly harmed, come to Broker and Beaker, a law firm, and we'll get justice for you. You've seen those ads. All right? The society is sick. Don't think you're immune. These things happen. If you don't have anything to take, guess what? Those lawsuits don't happen. All right? We talked about how tourists are always welcome, treated well. And really, when things get dicey and it's time to leave, you might have to leave quick. You want to be able to do so without hassle, that you've got a plan, you've got a place to go, you've got assets pre-positioned. These are all important considerations. Very important, okay? And as we've talked about in the introduction, there are so many laws, everyone is a criminal. And it's only a matter of time for you to appear on someone's target list. They go back in the files, pull a couple things out that, they know you've done. This law, that law, and just crazy, ridiculous crap. And boom, you're on the target list, and there we go. Now what? If you wait until then to start thinking about this, you know what? It's too late. No one's going to help you. You've got to solve these problems before they happen. And that's a real problem, because it's really sad, because most of the people I hear from them after they already have a problem. They don't want to take the time, they don't have the interest, they're too busy to be thinking about these things before a problem happens. Oh, everything's fine with me, I don't need that. And then boom, the hammer comes down. Oh, Mark, help me. I can't help you. It's too late. It's much easier to prevent a problem than to solve it once it happens. All right, so that's where we're at on that. So you've got to be able to be building a life as a PT where you've got more mobility, you've got freedom, you've got options, you've got more profits and cash flow to work with to do things. And in the end, you've got peace. You've got a life. All right, that's the objective. That's what we're headed for. If that's what you're looking for, then maybe I can help you. So, from there, let's get right into handling initial contact with police. This is action item number 1, and this is how I would handle it. There's different ways. All right, you've probably seen a few. The first thing I want to do, I want to let the officer know that I'm here to help him do his job. He's got a job to do. I respect that. He's a professional. I'm going to respect that. And so I'll say something like, he'll ask for the usual. Let me see your driver's license, proof of insurance, and registration. And first of all, I don't lower my window all the way down. That's dangerous. You're asking for trouble. I'll lower it maybe 2 or 3 inches so we can have clear communication, but he can't reach in and grab me. He can't mace me effectively, tase me, anything else like that, all right? Or reach in and plant drugs, you've heard that happening. So I'll say something, okay, officer, I'd be happy to accommodate you. I understand you need to protect yourself, just like I need to protect myself. So I appreciate your professional demeanor, all right? So really, it's a nice way of saying, I expect you to be professionals, okay? So you're pretty much laying down the law as to what you expect in a complimentary way. And you're also establishing your position. You go, okay, officer, I understand you need to protect yourself, and I'll be in full compliance, certainly. And you need to also understand I need to protect myself. So let's conduct this encounter efficiently and professionally is basically what we're saying. Okay, so you're establishing your understanding of his need to do his job, and you're also establishing your position at the same time. And so you've immediately elevated the situation from one where he's barking orders and you are completely subservient. Yes, sir. No, sir. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. You've immediately elevated the whole situation so that you're both on a level playing field. Okay? So that's important right there. So he's pulled you over, right? And he's asking for information. All right? Certainly, officer, I'd be happy to give you those things, but let me ask you first, what's your RAS? And say it in that way, using the initials, because he knows what you're talking about. All right? This is reasonable, articulable suspicion that a crime has been committed or was about to be committed. He needs to have that to detain you. Random checkpoint searches are not allowed by law. So right off the bat, that's going to put him on alert. He's going to be thinking to himself, oh, well, in fact, I had a cop one time just outright tell me, oh, what are you, an attorney? I didn't answer him. Sometimes I just let them draw their own conclusions. But you can see the result. They know that you know the rules of the game. So that puts him on alert. He's back on his heels a little bit, perhaps not quite so aggressive as he may have been initially. Okay, so he knows he's dealing with someone who's knowledgeable and knows the rules of the game. All right, so what's your RAS? Now, in addition to that, he also needs to have SAF, single articulable fact. So the RAS is dependent upon or based upon a single articulable fact that he can verbalize, which would support his reasonable suspicion that a crime was committed. All right, so you're going to ask him these two questions straight up. All right, now maybe he has that. Well, I clocked you on my radar going 12 miles over the speed limit. All right, well, he's just established that. Now he does have a reason to well, technically, for subjects anyway, to pull you over. All right, but if he doesn't have that, you might say something to the effect that, well, officer, you understand that pretextual stops or fishing expeditions are not allowed by law, and that does not allow you to detain me. So then I'm free to go, correct? So you make the statement, so I am free to go, correct? So you made a statement, and now you're asking for his confirmation for his agreement. And if he says no, well, then he's violating the law if he has not produced RAS or SAF. All right? So, what if he does have RAS or SAF? I used to have printed up a questionnaire based on the 1974 Privacy Act, which in part states something to the effect that whenever a government official is asking for personal information from you, you have the right to know who's going to see that information, how that information is going to be used, what security measures are in place to protect that information from being exposed to unauthorized parties, and a list of other similar type of requirements. And so I had a questionnaire that was pre-printed, and it was in duplicate, self-carbon or self-copying duplicate. And I'd say, okay, officer, I'd be happy to give you my proof of insurance, registration, and driver's license. And before I do that, I'd like you to fill out this questionnaire, please, relating to the Privacy Act 1974. I need to know how this information is going to be used and who's going to see it. Please sign and put your badge number on the bottom. And typically, this would put them on alert, and obviously they're not used to getting this. A couple times I've had the officer have to go back to his car, call in dispatch, and see what to do. And typically, what's happened is they just come back, hand that back to me, and basically just tell me I'm free to go because they didn't have RAS or SAF to begin with. Okay. So where do I get these things? These things come straight out of the Colorado Peace Officers Handbook. It's their training manual. And each state has their own version of the very same thing. Okay, so this isn't stuff, I just pulled off of some Patriot website somewhere. This comes right out of the Police Officers Handbook. This is how they're trained. All right, so there's something for you right there. Let's move on. Now, Border Patrol checkpoints is a different animal, all right? Here, they're conducting activities of a different nature, looking for illegal aliens, checking for your nationality, and making sure you're not sneaking over the border, that kind of thing. Today, you can routinely find Border Patrol checkpoints 100, 200 miles inland of the extreme borders of the United States. And this is just crazy. It's just crazy. So here's how to deal with that situation. Section 18.7 of the Border Patrol Inspector's Field Manual governing internal checkpoints states that before detaining anyone, again, the Border Patrol officer must have RAS, that the person is alien and illegal. And if he doesn't have reasonable articulable suspicion, he's got no right to detain you. In other words, he can't just go fishing for information. He can't pull you over, ask for your papers, search your car, hold you for 30 minutes, keep you waiting for 30 minutes while some other officer comes up to do the illegal search. They can't do any of that. All right, and here's your authority, the Border Patrol Inspector's Field Manual. All right, now you've got that information. So without RAS, detention is illegal, and the person of interest, i.e. you, is free to go. Okay? Now, there's all kinds of videos on YouTube on this subject and others and that kind of thing. If you find this particular one, look for the picture of this guy. If you find this particular one, it's really interesting because this Border Patrol officer is on the side of the driver. He hands him a pocket constitution in English and in Arabic, and it's very interesting because he's making the argument for the driver, and making the statement, you know, in order for me to do this, I have to have this and this, and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to respond. And so that's the last point here. You know, a citizen is not required to respond to the officer, and this is confirmed by the U.S. Supreme Court. You're not required to answer. Okay? Now, you've seen horror stories of cops where people have just stopped the car and kept their windows rolled up and wouldn't respond. I've seen videos where, you know, the cops will break the glass windows down and just have a hell of a time, you know, busting in. Completely illegal. These things happen. All right? But this is the law. And so if you understand the law, you can stand with a little bit more confidence in knowing how to handle yourself. Moving on, let's talk about jurisdiction and who is actually subject to the revenue laws. Okay? There's a thing called in personam jurisdiction, which is jurisdiction over the person that a court will assume. There's in rem jurisdiction, which is jurisdiction over the thing. A county court has in rem jurisdiction over a property that is located in the county, for example. Okay? In personam jurisdiction, we'd have to go into the law books to find out which persons are subject to the government, to the courts, to the legislation applying to those subjects. And each body of law has jurisdictional clauses that you can research. It's very easy. It's always in the front of the body of law. Motor Vehicle Code, for example, you could find out who the Motor Vehicle Code applies to. And we're going to look at that. All right. Original jurisdiction basically means a court's power to hear and decide a matter before any other court can review the matter. Okay? So if you had an issue, you wouldn't go directly to the appellate court, would you? You'd go to the court of original jurisdiction. All right, now, the state of Colorado or any state, any organized state in the Union of States is a corporate business. You have to understand that. It's regulated only by the corporate bylaws, which are the statutes. And that business extracts its business by force, compulsion, and induced volunteerism. In other words, induced volunteerism is a way where they induce you to voluntarily give up your rights in exchange for privileges. And most of the time it's without full disclosure. You don't know that you're volunteering because they make you think, based on your presumptions and assumptions that are false and erroneous, you think it's your legal obligation when it's not. It's volunteerism. All right, so it's all a trick. It's a big trick to get you to volunteer. We're going to talk about that. So you're going to volunteer, and they get this from the resident subjects who submit to it by way of application for benefits and adhesion contracts. We're going to talk about that. So this animal, the state of Colorado, is a subdivision of the corporate United States, which essentially is a municipal court for Washington, D.C. All right? And what the United States includes Washington, D.C., the possessions, forts, territories, docks, arsenals, and nothing more than that. So in order for you to be subject to your local county court, you're basically making admissions and confessions that you are a citizen of Washington, D.C., which is false, or was false in the beginning, until you agreed and acquiesced through lack of informed consent. You applied for benefits, and when you did that, you admitted and confessed, yes, I am a United States citizen. And so you signed the application for benefits document as such, with those confessions and admissions. And so by that contract, you are now subject, right? So the state of Colorado is a corporate animal. It's regulated and managed entirely different from Colorado State, which is one of the states of the Union of States, entirely separate from the United States social democracy. Colorado State is one of the states in the Republic of the United States of America. And if you're not familiar, United, spelled with a small u, makes United an adjective. It's not part of the pronoun United States of America as the name. The States of America is the pronoun. United is merely a descriptive term, being an adjective. All right? So there's a big difference. Look at the paragraph above. United States, all capital letters, corporate democracy. The United, adjective, States of America, entirely different animal. You understand that, or should. That's a whole other rabbit trail we can go down. So let's see who we're subject to. Okay, this is fundamental. If you are making a clay pot, right? You are the potter. You put that clay on the table, start spinning the table, start forming your pot. If when you get finished you don't like it, you crumple up the clay, you toss it, and you start over. You can do with the pot what you like. If you like the product, you might glaze it, decorate it, do a lot of different things to it. You can sell it. And that's what a creator does to the thing he or she is creating. The creator has dominion over the creation. So, in the beginning, you were created by God. You were created by God as a man or a woman. You were subject to God. You were subject to organic, natural law, which basically goes back to ecclesiastical law, which is God's law, immutable law, the law of nature, the law of the universe. These things don't change. They're the same today as they were yesterday and will be in the future. Okay? So what happens, and we're talking about jurisdiction, what happens is the government induces you to apply for benefits without full disclosure. And when you apply for those benefits, you are now admitting that no, you no longer belong to God, but you now become a person who is subject to the legislature. That's your new God, okay? This is very serious. It's a very serious issue. And we use that term person loosely. Oh, look at that person over there. You know, it's just become a part of the common vernacular. All right? Take a look at the definition here at the bottom. In the Colorado Revised Statutes, Title 42, Section 1, subsection 102, paragraph 69, person is defined. And here they say, a person means a natural person, estate, trust, firm, co-partnership, association, corporation, or business entity. Now let's look at that. This is very interesting, okay? Now, everything that comes after natural person is some form of fictional business entity. Am I right? Yes. Everything is a business entity. Now, in the grammatical context, looking at grammatical construction, you know as well as anybody does, when you're defining a term, you cannot use that term or that word in the definition. It's like, I ask you, give me the definition of red. Well, and you say, well, red is the color red. Well, that doesn't tell me anything, does it? I want to know what red is, and you're asking me to understand red by explaining it using the word red. Doesn't work. And what you'll find if you get into deep legal research over time, you'll find that, and I'm going to show you examples later, that the legislatures are rewriting definitions, they're rewriting laws, they're changing words, they're changing terms to obfuscate reality. They're trying to hide things from you. Okay? So, what is a person? This definition is nonsensical. It's null and void because you can't use the word to define the word. Now, if we just take that first part out, person means natural person. Okay, that's null and void just on the face due to a failure to follow grammatical construction. All right, everything after that's a business entity. We can reasonably presume and deduce that everything listed here is a business entity. And if we go back to the Corporations Act of 1869, the first one was in 1862, they changed the word person to a corporate definition. So anytime you refer to this person, that person, are you the person? Person is an office. It's an office created by the government, by the legislature. And if you admit to being the person, then you admit that you are holding that office of person as created by the legislature. And since the legislature created that office, it can obviously control it. And just like God, if you are obedient to God and honor Him, He'll bless you. If you are disobedient, He'll punish you and chastise you in a way that a loving father does so that you can learn and not make the same mistake twice. What does the legislature do? They control the office of the person. They can issue you the benefits, and if you're a bad boy or a bad girl, they can take those benefits away. In addition to taking away the benefits, they can penalize you, and they can commit you to jail, insane asylum, re-education camp. There's a whole list. So this is fundamental. And everything revolves around this slide right here. So are you a man operating under the organic de jure law of the Republic, which comes from God? Nature's law, it's derived from that. Or do you hold the office of person and you're subject to legislature? Okay? This is critical as we talk about jurisdiction. All right, you get the point. So who is subject, right? The local revenue laws apply to residents. Let's break that word down. Again, words are powerful. The meaning of everything is in the words. Res is Latin for the thing. Ident is the root to identified or identify or identifier. Identified as what? Identified as theirs, chattel property. Okay? The person who's subject is the thing identified as being subject to the regulations which apply to the office of person. So, let's look at Colorado Revised Statutes. Again, Title 42, which, by the way, Title 42 is the Motor Vehicle Code. Okay? Resident means any person You understand that now? Who owns or operates any business in this state, or any person who has resided within the state continuously for 90 days or has obtained gainful employment within this state, whichever shall occur first. All right, so what's a resident? Anybody who holds the office of person who either owns or operates a business or who has resided in the state continuously. All right, so that's who the revenue laws apply to. Residents, persons who reside and or do business in the state. Now, we can also start defining state, and we'll do that in a little bit. What state are we talking about? All right, but we've established that. So to take this further, look down below here. This rule relating to personal service outside the state is confined to the question of who is or who is not a resident of the state of Colorado. That's a case of Kellner versus the district court, where they were trying to decide the issue of someone who was given personal service in some kind of legal proceeding, and they're trying to decide, who in fact is subject to that personal service. Okay. The burden of proof, we go on to say, the burden of proof is on the plaintiff. So when the question of Colorado residence is raised and a denial thereof prima facie made, prima facie is on the surface, on the face, okay? The burden of establishing or proving that the defendants are in fact residents is on the plaintiffs. All right, so this is a very key point here. What they're saying is, outside of any evidence to the contrary, if you deny that you are in fact a resident, now the burden of proof is on the plaintiff, which in this case would be the state if they're trying to bring service on you or bring a complaint or an action against you. The burden of proof is on the state to prove that you are a resident. All right? So that's something in your favor right off the bat. Now, we talked earlier, we're going to talk about the hooks, how they get us hooked in, and whether or not you have those hooks will determine if they can make a determination if you are a resident or not. Okay? So, residence and domicile are commonly taken as being synonymous, notwithstanding that in precise usage they are not convertible terms. So what they're saying is residence and domicile are commonly used as being interchangeable when in fact they are not interchangeable terms. They have different meanings. Okay? A place of abode is not necessarily synonymous with domicile. So now we have three terms that mean different things. The term usual place of abode has generally been construed to mean the place where that person is actually living at the time service is attempted. It's not necessarily synonymous with domicile. In other words, if you're spending a week with a friend, living at a friend's house, when they tried to serve you because they followed you around, they found you at your friend's house, all right, what they're saying is that was your place of abode, and it's not necessarily a domicile or a residence. So what this is saying is that if it's established that when they served you, you were in a place of abode, that's not necessarily proof of residence. Right? All right, so we have to think through and say, what are they actually saying here? What does this mean in practical terms? So residence is actually determined by intention of the parties supported by acts. Domicile or residence, as used in this rule in a legal sense, is determined by the intention of the parties. But while intention seems to be the controlling element, it is not always conclusive, unless the intention is fortified by some act or acts in support thereof. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that residence can be established if they show that you intended to establish a residence, and ways of doing that would be if you went down and registered as a voter, and you put down your residential address. That would be an indication of intention to use that as a residential address, right? Okay, that would be the act in support of the intention. Or if you went down and opened a bank account, filled out the forms using that residential address, that would be the act in support of your intention to establish that as your residence. You with me? All right, so these are important things to understand as to how the law looks at that and how residence is established. If you do not want to be perceived as a resident who is subject to the local compelled performance requirement statutes, then these are important to understand. So the issue of domicile is a compound question of fact and intention again. Okay? Now, domicile, how does that differ from residence? I can speak in reference to the domicile of a business. All right, for example, I may have a company that has a domicile that was created, established, and resides, legally speaking, in Costa Rica, but it does business outside of Costa Rica. Or I can say that I have a limited liability company, an LLC, that's domiciled in Delaware, but the LLC does most of its business in California. So the domicile and the place of operation, or the domicile and the residence, could be two different locations. All right. Domicile could be referred to as the situs, S-I-T-U-S. It's a Latin term for the seat, the home, kind of where it considers home. And by that, it would be subject to the home rules of that situs. Okay? As I mentioned, the change of voting place surely is compelling evidence of the intention of making a change of residence. Okay? Bank account, setting up a check cashing account at the supermarket, things like this are compelling evidence of establishing your residence. And here they're saying in Kellner versus District Court that residence may commence in another state before a definite county or precinct is fixed for permanent residence. So what they're saying is you may not have a permanent residence, but that residence may commence prior to a permanent residency. A lot of times people move to get a new job, and maybe they live out of a hotel for a month while they're looking for a place. And while they're doing that, they establish certain things about, their residency and so forth. And that all happens before they actually find a home and move into that home as a permanent residence, right? Okay, so again, not splitting hairs, but we're separating definitions and what the law requires to be established as a so-called resident. Okay? So let's look at the power of words, and this is fun. This is really, I've had a lot of fun with this. Typically officials, with this understanding of the things we just covered and more, officials will fish for information to trap you. If you're standing in front of the judge, or if you're sitting in front of the police officer in a roadside traffic stop, they'll start asking you questions, and they may seem innocuous, but no, they're not innocuous. They have a very specific intent and purpose, and that is to establish you as a local resident subject to whom they are going to apply sanctions and the rules, forms, fees, fines, and penalties, right? So they're going to try and get you with words and questions like, well, where do you live? All right? This is a kind of a code for what is your permanent residence. My typical answer to that might be, well, and I'm not being a smart aleck judge, but the fact is that I move around a lot. I am living now, and right now I am here. And so, to really be truthful with your question, I am living here right now. And that's the truth. That's not being a smart aleck. All right, so now she might want to get more specific. All right, well, where do you work? I don't like that term work just because of, the common understanding is like, where do you have a job? And I don't like the idea of having a job because that's basically engaging in business, right? Engaged in commercial activity. Having gainful employment, that's one of the requirements of being a resident. So my response would be, I don't work. I don't have work right now. I do lend my services and toil and labor, wherever I can find someone to, exchange something of value. And that's being truthful. Again, some people take that as being smart alecky. Learn to tell the truth without making admissions and confessions that are going to hook you, right? So I've set up a private Christian foundation, and honestly, I do missionary work. Well, I work wherever God leads me. Or if you're a Christian, I work in God's kingdom. Wherever He leads me is where I do wherever I labor to build God's kingdom. Well, are you a resident of the state of Florida? Or whatever the state is? No, I'm sorry, I'm not. No, ma'am, not a resident. Nope. Well, are you a United States citizen? If you understand the definition of United States coming right out of the U.S. Code, unless you live in Washington, D.C., or Puerto Rico, or Guam, the answer should probably be no. Are you a United States citizen? And that's a tricky question because in some cases they might be trying to establish, are you legal to be here, going back to the Border Patrol checkpoint. And a truthful response to that would be, well, no, I'm not. Actually, I was born in Illinois State. So I'm a citizen of Illinois State, not the state of Illinois, mind you. That's the corporate democracy. Illinois State, it's a different animal. It's part of the republic. So no, I'm not a U.S. citizen. You could say, no, I'm not a U.S. citizen. I'm a citizen of the Republic of the United States of America. But even that, for me, is getting a little bit too close to danger. I prefer, my first response. No, I'm not a United States citizen. I was born in Illinois. That's being truthful. Okay, well, and I had a judge ask me this one time directly. Well, how do you support yourself? And I paused for a moment, thought about that, and I said, well, by the grace of God, thank you. And you? You do well? Thank you for your concern. And this is all very legitimate, heartfelt, and truthful. Okay, learn to tell the truth. Learn to speak in terms of the truth, that you don't get those hooks set in you. Okay, you can tell by this question, they're trying to get you to admit, well, I work as a manager down at Quick Copy. Oh, okay, so you have gainful employment within the state, therefore you're a resident. Gotcha. Okay, next, let's move on now. So once they get those hooks, they proceed. All right, well, what do you do for a living? I work as an ambassador for the kingdom of heaven, and the good Lord provides for me. Or, if you're not Christian, you might say something to the effect, well, I exchange my labor with whoever's willing to give me something of value for it, wherever I can find that. Well, where is that? Well, right now I'm here, I'm not working. I'm here in front of you, so I'm not working right now. Okay, learn to tell the truth. Learn what's reality. Learn how to avoid the hooks. Well, aren't you the person that's named in this complaint? No, ma'am, I'm sorry, I'm not that person. I don't hold the office of a person. I work for the kingdom of heaven. I'm subject to the kingdom of heaven, work for God, and no, I don't hold the office of person, so I'm not that person. And, there's a number of responses you come up with for that, but you're starting to understand the idea. Because, well, you do drive a motor vehicle, don't you? And you'll see these are commercial terms, and you don't want to get sucked into that. And, the fact is, no, I don't drive a motor vehicle engaged in commerce. I don't engage in commercial activity. However, I do manage my automobile from time to time. But no, I don't drive a motor vehicle at all. Thank you for asking. All right, you get the idea? So, lawyers run the government, right? I don't think you can count on, there's more than what you can count on one hand, members of the House and Senate that are not lawyers. Lawyers are in control of everything pretty much. And they learn how to use the words of art and the power of presumption. They'll say one thing and they know what they're talking about. But you know what? You understand things in a different way. You understand things in the common vernacular. They understand things in terms of legal definitions. So they'll say something with a specific meaning which you don't understand. You understand it differently, and you'll respond based on your uninformed understanding. And in the process, you'll make admissions and confessions, and this is how they set the hooks. All right, so you've got to learn to tell the truth and let others deceive themselves. What do I mean by that? All right, well, the police officer is filling out a stolen vehicle report. This happened to me one time. Well, what's your social security number? And he's grilling me with all these questions. I go, why are you grilling me with all these questions? I'm the victim here. You got my name, you got the apartment where I live. All right, I've identified the vehicle that was stolen. Why do you have all these questions? Oh, he says, well, the form requires it. Oh my God, he's a slave to the form. And what's your social security number? And I just say flat out, I don't have a social security number. And it's true. The word have reflects possessory rights or possession rights, correct? If you have something, you have full control of it. You have ownership, you have possession, fee simple ownership. If you have a bicycle, you can change the bicycle, you can paint it, you can modify it, you can sell it. Can you do any of those things with a social security number? No, you can't change it, you can't sell it, you can't modify it. So you don't have it. It's not yours. It belongs to the issuer, the Social Security Administration. They have assigned a number to a legal fiction, a fictitious person, which is in all capital letters. The person, the legal fiction, the corporate entity. You are the man. You do not have a social security number. And that's the truth. You understand that? Well, I'm here, Judge. I'm the attorney for Gidgets Widgets, or whatever the name is. Could be your own name in all capital letters, the fiction. I'm the attorney. Well, when you use the word attorney, people typically take that to mean attorney at law. Well, operating in business for as many years as I have, I always operate, almost always, with various companies in the capacity as the attorney in fact, which means that I have a power of attorney to conduct business for this company, to act as full representative. Or perhaps it's a limited power of attorney to conduct a specific operation or activity. but I am the attorney in fact, based on the power of attorney. So you have attorney in fact, you have attorney at law. People don't understand attorney in fact, and when you use that term attorney, they just assume you're the attorney at law. And this happens to me all the time. I sign my name on behalf of, on a contract as the attorney for this company, and people just assume, oh, you're an attorney, huh? Oh, I didn't know that. And so they make their own presumptions. You don't have to explain. You don't have to go into a long explanation. Let people make their own assumptions. You just tell the truth. People will get tangled up in their own underwear just based on their own misinterpretations. That's not your problem. All right? That's theirs. We talk about these issues. People ask all the time, Mark, do you pay taxes? Well, of course I do. I pay all my taxes. All right? Well, people take that to mean a certain thing. That I do things exactly the same way that they do and fill out forms and send in checks and do this and that and everything else. Well, no. What I said is I pay all my taxes, all of the taxes that apply to me. Which when it comes to income taxes, I don't have any income. I don't avoid taxes. I don't, break the law, willful failure to file. I don't do any of that. I just don't have any income. So I'm not a taxpayer by definition, so that doesn't fit for me. But yeah, I pay all my taxes. Thankfully, they're a lot less than what most people pay. I pay all kinds of use taxes, excise taxes, gasoline taxes, highway taxes, retail sales taxes, county taxes. The list goes on. It's huge. But yeah, I pay all my taxes. I'm a good citizen. I pay all my taxes. Okay, well, what's your address? Well, officer, can I take that to mean you're asking what my permanent address is? Well, yes, yeah. What's your address? And think about it. Think about all the addresses, all the places you've lived in the past. All right, think about those addresses. All right, how many of those were permanent? You follow what I'm saying here? You've never had a permanent address. Never. There's no such thing as a permanent address. You might own the home that you live in. You're going to retire there. You're going to die there. But you know what? Once you're dead and gone, you're moving on. You're not going to be in that house anymore. So even though this might be the last house you live in on this earth, that's not a permanent address. He says, well, officer, I'm sorry, but right now, I don't have a permanent address. Well, where do you live? Well, I'm living and I'm here, so I guess I'm living here. Well, where do you get your mail? Well, I get my mail at a mail drop in Costa Rica. Okay, you see where we're going with this? I don't have a permanent address. You remember when Bill Clinton was being impeached? He says, oh, it depends on what the definition of is. And you remember how everybody chided him, was laughing at him, mocking him. Oh, what a fool, what a farce. He's just playing with mind games with, these investigators, and, what a cheesy scumbag. And you know what? All the people that said that don't know what the heck they're talking about. Bill Clinton was right on. He's an attorney. He understands these things. When someone asks you a question, it's important to understand the exact definition of the words that they use so that you can respond with the same understanding. Otherwise, you're going to give a response to a different question. You've got one question in your mind. The person giving the question had a different question in his mind. So you're not on the same page, and it's impossible to have truthful interaction when you've got false assumptions and presumptions being made. And so Bill Clinton was right on when he said this. He's an attorney. He knows these games. It depends on what the definition of is. Okay? So that's a clue for you right there. So this is amazing, isn't it? The power of words, words of art, and the power of presumption. Learn to tell the truth. Learn to use words in a truthful way. And you don't have to explain everything. Let people get tangled up in their own underwear. Let them chase their own rabbit trails and go off in their own direction. They don't need to understand all of these issues. Okay? So the fact is that subjects have no rights. They don't. There's no rights. If you're a subject, resident, working, doing business in the state of, you don't have any rights. So quit complaining about not having constitutional rights. You know, this really irks me, the level of ignorance that we all have, you know, and I've been in the same boat, you know, until I learned these things. We don't have rights, so quit talking about constitutional rights. You've admitted and confessed that you are a U.S. citizen, subject, slave. You're asking for benefits, you've applied for benefits, and you've accepted the contracts. You've done that through your own volition. Quit complaining about rights. You've entered into a contract voluntarily. All right? So, and that's all you have. You've got the obligations and penalties that go along with those contracts. Many are disclosed, most are undisclosed. You were never given full disclosure or you never would have done it, right? Warning, do not apply for Social Security number if you want to give up your God-given rights. How many people would still apply? Well, unfortunately, probably too many. But not near as many, okay? So you've got no rights. You've exchanged them for privileges. Privileges can be taken away on a whim. Your rights were forfeited and subjugated when you voluntarily gave them away in exchange for those benefits. And this was done by consent of contract, and you had to lie to do it. You made false admissions to do so. Oh, this is only available to U.S. citizens. You are a U.S. citizen, right? Right. Born in Texas, but I'm a U.S. citizen. Okay? So we are just as guilty as anybody. We're the guilty party here for being ignorant and volunteering away our rights, just like Esau did. Gave up his birthright and inheritance for a bowl of porridge in the book of Genesis, right? So everything is governed, you included, by the lex mercatoria. That's Latin, and English we know it as the law merchant, where everything is regulated in commerce. Everything. Everything is relegated to a commercial activity, and therefore it can be regulated. Interesting point, I was reading a book about the Christian history of the U.S. Constitution, and was reading about the days of the colonies in the early days, late 1600s, long before the Revolution, where the Crown of England was getting concerned about a rise in sentiment for independence in the colonies. You know, they were talking about it from a very early stage. And long story short, what the Crown finally decided is that what we're going to do is we're going to implement lex mercatoria, make everything commerce, and by that we can control them no matter what they do politically. So the United States has been controlled by commercial law, the law merchant, ever since the late 1600s, you know, even before the United States existed as a country. Interesting, isn't it? So let's take a closer look at that, okay? Lex mercatoria, this comes from Wikipedia, and it comes from the Latin word for merchant law. It's often referred to as law merchant, as I just said. This is the body of commercial law used by merchants throughout Europe during the medieval period, is when it first started arising. It evolved similar to English common law as a system of custom and best practice. Okay, so it wasn't necessarily all written out, but it was a matter of practices that were assumed and understood. This is how we do things. And so it was enforced through a system of merchant courts along the main trade routes. And it functioned as the international law of commerce. Everywhere. It's not just, well, you have this law in this kingdom and a different law in a different kingdom. No, this is the international law of commerce that everybody understood applied and respected. It emphasized contractual freedom. We just talked about that. You had the freedom to enter into those contracts with government or not, and you did. So now you're in those contracts. It emphasized the alienability of property. This is interesting. Property. Property always comes under the question of title and ownership, right? And under the law merchant, property is alienable. In other words, the beneficial and or legal interest can change. You can alienate that property from yourself, or others perhaps can alienate your property from you. Okay? You're starting to see how this develops here? All right, so they've got contractual freedom, alienability of property, while shunning legal technicalities. This is really interesting. And deciding cases ex aequo e bono. Let's look at this with the asterisk. Let's go down to the bottom of the page. Ex aequo e bono is Latin for according to the right and good, or from equity and conscience. And it's a phrase derived from the Latin that's used as a legal term of art. Okay? Warning bells should be going off right now in your head, right? A legal term of art. In the context of arbitration, which is what your judges in the courts do, they're arbitrators in administrative proceedings. There is no law being applied, but they're arbitrating an administrative hearing under the bankruptcy rules. It refers to the power of arbitrators, judges, to dispense with the consideration of the law, but consider solely what they consider to be fair and equitable in the case at hand. Now, I hope you understand the significance of that. If you've been in court, you've probably witnessed firsthand how the judge will just ignore the law. The law has no place in that courtroom. Why? Because as an arbitrator, that judge, under lex mercatoria, which is what we're all under, operating under worldwide, under lex mercatoria, the judge can dispense with the law and consider solely what they consider, in their opinion, to be fair and equitable in the case at hand. Now, since the judge works for the corporate democracy, what they consider to be fair and equitable is probably going to be a little bit tainted, and I would venture to say in more cases than not, it won't be in your favor, will it? What will be fair and equitable for their masters? They hold the office of person. They are paid and their livelihood is provided by operating that office of person for the benefit of their masters. They can dispense with the law and do what they consider to be fair and equitable for all parties at hand. You understand the significance of what I just mentioned? I think you do. This is why the courts are basically lawless. Because we're operating under the law merchant. And things haven't changed. So again, forget about demanding your rights. This only demonstrates your ignorance of the situation. You have no rights as long as you're a subject resident. Okay? You want rights? You need to move out of this realm into another realm under God. All right? And that's what we're talking about with this series. That's why you're here. So, you know you voluntarily gave up your right to travel freely. You always had the right to travel down the road until you applied for a driver's license. You know, once you did that, that's a privilege they can take away. You gave up your right to own your children. You know that the Department of Child Services can come into your house, take your children without a warrant, without cause. The neighbor complains that you spanked your kids. Boom, sheriff shows up at the door with Child Protective Services, and away they go. Say goodbye to your kids. The state is a third party to your marriage. When you applied for that marriage license, look on the back of it. I just talked to a fellow from Montana just recently, and he says point blank, on the back of that marriage license, it states explicitly, all products of this marriage are property of the state. Well, what's the product of the marriage? Children. All right? So let me ask you this. If a license or a permit is permission to do that which is otherwise illegal, when did getting married become illegal? It's never been illegal. But you wanted tax benefits, you wanted legal benefits in your office of person, so you went and got the marriage license. All right? And so now your children are property of the state. Congratulations. You gave up your right to private banking. You go down, you open up the bank account. What does the bank contract and agreement talk about? It talks about FDIC benefits. You want those benefits? It's mandatory to come with the account. All right, you sign the bank account agreement. You are a U.S. person accepting federal benefits. Boom. That's how the IRS can come in, take your money without due process. It belongs to the state. Your account is not private. It belongs to the state. You gave up your right to private property. You don't understand allodial title. What's that term, allodial? Allodial means beholden to no one. This is where you get the term, I'm king of my castle. In my home, I'm king of the castle. Not anymore. You're not king. You have to bow down to your king. What happens if you don't pay your property taxes? Property taxes are not taxes. They're rent. It's a tithe to the king. And if you don't tithe to the king, what do they do with your property? They take it away. They kick you off. You don't tithe to the king, you're gone. You're out of there, buster. Get off this property. Sheriff comes, throws your furniture on the front of the street with all your clothes and personal belongings, and get the hell out of here. You don't own your property. Let's get a clue. All right, you gave up your right to enjoy all the fruits of your labor. You got withholdings for this, that, and everything else. You know, by the time it's all said and done, you're lucky to bring home 50, 60% of what you make. You wanted benefits from the federal government? All right, it's going to cost you. Federal government wants their cut. All right? So these are distressing issues. I get upset just talking about it. You can probably tell. All right, so subjects follow the corporate rules or they lose their property. I emphasize there to be facetious because you don't own any property. You've used Federal Reserve notes to purchase it, which never paid for a thing. It merely discharged the liability of debt with promises to pay which never get paid. And for the use of that franchise, that benefit, you don't own it. You just simply enjoy the right to beneficial use. Subjects have to pay permissions to do things. You have to get permission to drive a motor vehicle, get permission to get married, get permission to fix your own house, get permission to clean your gutters. You know, the list goes on. And if you do those things without getting permission and paying for permission to do that which you otherwise had the right to do, you get committed to jail or an insane asylum. And I know of 2 cases right off the bat where a person, refused to get permits to fix his own house. They came along, picked him up, took him to an insane asylum, was committed for a couple months. What does that do to your life when you can't attend to daily needs for a couple months? Ruins your whole life. Subjects pay for permissions or they get committed or they deem themselves incompetent. You need the state to take care of you. In fact, right now, just recently, you may have heard the story where veterans or other citizens who are receiving benefits, financial benefits, I don't know if it was welfare or disability checks or veterans or maybe all of the above, but a court made a determination that if you use automatic bank transfer to make an automatic deposit of those benefits to your bank account, they presume that you are incompetent to handle your own affairs because you're setting it up automatically, and therefore you're deemed an incompetent. What does that do to your status? I hope you're starting to see how serious this is. These are really serious issues. This is not just fun and games, and I mentioned that in the introduction. Okay, so let's look at some statutory definitions. Again, taken from Colorado Revised Statutes from the Motor Vehicle Code. We'll look at what's an automobile means, any motor vehicle. Well, under definition 58, motor vehicle means any self-propelled vehicle which is designed primarily for travel, good, on the public highways, and, there's a conjunction there, and which is generally and commonly used to transport persons and property over the public highways. All right, well, that seems fairly straightforward, right? It's because we're using the common vernacular of the word transport. That's a key word here. Let's look at that word transport. You're not understanding how the lawyers want to interpret transport. So let's look at definition 17 for commercial carrier, which means any owner of a motor vehicle, truck or otherwise, used in the business of transporting persons or property for profit, hire, or otherwise in any business or commercial enterprise. Wow, okay. So they're using that word transporting to define commercial carrier who operates for profit or hire in a business or commercial enterprise. All right, well, okay. Fair enough. So let's go to 17.5. Commercial vehicle means a vehicle used for cargo or passengers for or otherwise to further the purposes of a commercial enterprise. Okay, well, that makes sense, right? Then the definition for transporter. Now, transport is the verb. Transporter is a noun, all with the same root to the word. Transport means every person engaged in the business. And we don't need to see anything more. A transporter is engaged in a business. Okay? We look at Black's Law Dictionary, maybe for further clarification. Transportation, the movement of goods or persons from one place to another by a carrier. All right, so stop right there. Go back up to motor vehicle on the top, definition 58. And we looked at the verb transport, right? Motor vehicle. And if transport is defined in Black's Law Dictionary, by the way, Black's Law is a legal dictionary that uses definitions that have been given in court decisions. So everything in the definitions in Black's Law Dictionaries have been issued by the courts, okay? So transportation is the movements of goods or persons from one place to another by a carrier, and if a carrier is an individual organization that transports the same as you transport in a motor vehicle, passengers or goods for a fee. So if you're involved in transportation, which by word of art, the verb transport is used if you're operating a motor vehicle, if you're involved in transportation, you are in fact a carrier, and a carrier we know is engaged in business. So there you go. By virtue of your driver's license, you are engaged in commercial activity, which is fully regulated. You see how this works? Words of art. All right? What's a non-resident? Means every man or woman who holds the office of person who is not a resident of the state. Okay, so just by claiming non-resident status, you're admitting to being a person. So you don't want to be a non-resident. Your solution is not to say, well, I'm not a resident of the state, I'm non-resident. Well, that just means you're a person holding the office of person subject to the legislature. Okay? So again, person means natural person. You can't define a term with the same term. So that's null and void, and that only leaves estate, trust, firm, co-partnership, association, corporation, or business entity. So if you are a non-resident, that means you're still a person, which means you're basically some form of fictitious business entity. What do business entities do? They do business. They're engaged in commerce. You see how this all works together, right? So that's interesting. What else can we do? Let's talk about certificates of title for a minute. This is really interesting. All right? Colorado Revised Statutes says that the applications for filing certificates of title, here are the rules, right? Number one, if a person who desires or who is entitled to a filing must use a form provided to include the owner's personal identification number as provided on a state-issued driver's license. So what's that telling us? That means that if you are not a person, and if you do not have a state-issued driver's license, they will not issue you a certificate of title. Another way of looking at that is this is confirmation that the state, which is a fiction, cannot deal with real people, a man and a woman. They can only deal with other fictions. So unless you admit to being a fiction, business entity, they will not deal with you because they cannot. A fiction can only deal with another fiction. The two sets of rules don't mix. Okay? Now, one last point on this. Look at this. If a person who desires or who is entitled, it doesn't say this person must. So the application for certificate of title is entirely voluntary, isn't it? Isn't that interesting? You don't have to have a certificate of title. Well, why not, I wonder? Actually, I don't wonder. I'm going to tell you why. All right, take a look at this. Certificate of title is just like a certificate of insurance. If you've ever been on a group insurance plan with your employer, the employer gets the policy, right? He pays for the policy, he's the applicant, he gets the policy, and it includes all of the participating employees. So the employer gets the policy. The employees get a certificate of insurance. This definition is copied directly out of Black's Law Dictionary, 5th edition, or 6th. I'll show you in just a minute. But let's read it. Certificate of insurance is a document evidencing fact that an insurance policy has been written and includes a statement of the coverage of the policy in general terms. Doesn't give the specific terms because that's all in the original contract. But the certificate is just proof that the policy does exist and it explains the general terms of what's in the policy for the benefit of the person holding the certificate of insurance. So as an employee, you don't hold the original document, do you? You don't hold the original policy. No, that's the title to the benefits. That's the actual title, is the policy. All right? So a certificate of title is just like a certificate of insurance. And this is really fascinating. Look up in Black's Law Dictionary, and it is the 5th edition. If you look up certificate of title in Black's Law, this is what you find. It says, see insurance, title insurance. Wow. So a certificate of title is title insurance. But, all right, does it say anything about being a title? No, it doesn't say anything about the title. It just says it's title insurance. Now here's something that will really tick you off. Go to Black's Law Dictionary 6th edition, look up certificate of title, and you will not find this definition. You see, as people start catching on to these tricks and traps, the lawyers keep changing definitions, like we saw with the definition of person. Person means a natural person and all these business entities. It's just bullcrap. Okay? They keep changing things up to hide these things from you. You can do this. You can go online, find the 5th edition, look up certificate of title, this is what you're going to find. Look up the same thing in the 6th edition, you're going to find a completely different definition. Trying to appease the ignorant and keep us all in line so we don't catch on. Isn't that interesting? So if the certificate of title is not title, what is it? It's a voluntary, we just saw up above, a person who desires or who is entitled may apply and then must use a form provided by the director. Okay, so a certificate of title is a voluntary insurance contract to protect you from hidden liens, and it's only for state persons. Now, isn't that interesting? So it's voluntary, it's an insurance contract, and you don't have to have one. Wow. So what is the title, and who holds it? Where is it? A certificate of title is not the title. Where is the title? The title is in the manufacturer's statement of origin. It's sometimes referred to as the manufacturer's certificate of origin. And if you go look that up, they're going to try and fool you by saying something like, oh, this is just required for exports so that people know what country it was made in. That's bullcrap. The manufacturer's statement of origin is, in essence, the birth certificate of the automobile. It's verification that it was made here and now in this location by such and such company. And what happens is when that car is delivered to the dealership, it comes with the manufacturer's statement of origin. Let's say you pay cash for the car, right? And then we are told, well, we have to apply for plates and register it to the state. All right, well, we know these are voluntary benefits that we're seeking, but we're told this is what we have to do, so we do it. And when we do that, when we apply for those benefits, what we're telling the dealer is that we want a certificate of title because we don't know any other option. We're told this is the title, but it's not. So we want a certificate of title. I paid cash. So, okay, well, you got to register the car, get plates, and what the dealer does is they send the title, the manufacturer's statement of origin, to the state. And so the state is holding the title to your car. And guess what that means? That means the state is the owner of your car. Don't believe me? Look at the annual registration stickers that you put in the corner of the license plate each year. Go back and look at those. In fine, very fine hairline printing, you're going to see for official use only. Well, we all know that plates that say for official use only are property of the state, right? That car is property of the states for official use only. Well, when that sticker is affixed to your plate, which is affixed to the car, and the manufacturer's statement of origin is held by the state, and your certificate of title is merely a private insurance contract, it's clear who the owner is. You just paid cash for a car that you do not have ownership. You've been defrauded. You don't have ownership rights in that car. What would happen if you brought that issue up with the dealer? That's fraud. That's illegal conversion of assets. Theft. You paid cash for a car that you don't have ownership of. Interesting proposition, isn't it? So, you think you own your car? Start violating some of the rules that the owner has imposed on you to use it. See what happens to the car. They're going to take it from you, put it in the impound lot and sell it. You don't own that car. All right? Isn't that fun? Yeah. We're really having fun now. Okay, so let's continue. We'll look at certificates of registration and license plates. No certificate of registration of any motor vehicle required by law or license plates, therefore, shall be issued by the director or any of his people, except in the following cases. Okay? So you can only get certificate of registration and license plates if A, the applicant has procured and exhibits to the director or his people, or they have on file an official certificate of title. Okay? So if you don't want their private insurance, you can't get registration. All right? You got to do business with them if you want the registration. All right, so they're creating a monopoly. It's business. That's all it is business. B, the applicant submits evidence to the director or his people that satisfies them pursuant to provisions of this part or to a law in force in effect before 1949, which is when these laws came into passing, from which it appears that the applicant is the owner of the vehicle sought to be registered and licensed. Okay? So any evidence submitted to the director or the director's authorized agent may be maintained in a paper or electronic version. Okay? So to establish who is the owner, you've got to establish that you are a person, you're someone holding the office of person with a driver's license who has gotten a certificate of title, and you're completely subject to the state. And so they're really misleading us by making reference to the fact that the applicant is the owner, okay, when in fact they know very well who the owner is. The owner is the one who can control the entity, the property. And then C, this applicant applies for an official certificate of title. So you got to prove that you are a subject, resident, holder of the office of person, basically a slave to the state, in order to get registration. Now, conversely, this is where it starts to get fun. Okay, if you don't have any of these things, then how does another person who doesn't meet these terms and conditions, how do they get registration and plates? All right, and this is where we can start having some fun. Okay, hold on, we're going to have some fun with this. If I can just get the slides to change. All right, first we're going to look at the driver's license. Again, no holder of the office of person shall drive any commercial vehicle upon a highway in this fictional corporate state unless he has been issued a currently valid driver's license. Okay, so they're just telling you who is required. Someone holding the office of person, operating in the fictional corporate state. Well, what about the people that aren't? Is the question, right? So then we look at Section 58, where we talked about what the motor vehicle means, transporting, that commercial term, persons and property, or a low-speed electric vehicle. Let's go back to that. This is kind of interesting because initially licenses were required in the early days of automobiles because a motor has traditionally meant reference to either a DC or an AC electric motor. And there were times in the early days of automobiles where there were electric motors in the cars, but they were so heavy that they created damage to the streets, excessive damage. And this is where the licensure came into play, is to try and control the use of these really heavy automobiles that were causing damage on the streets. And that's where motor vehicle really comes from. It was a regulated electric motor. And so with that understanding of history, now we see that motor vehicle means any self-propelled vehicle which is engaged in transportation, commercial activity to support a business only for men and women who hold office of persons, or a low-speed electric vehicle. Okay? So it's just interesting to see how, that element of history is still tied into the definition of motor vehicle. You can do some research on that, and that's kind of an interesting subject. So here's what I did, all right? Here's action item number 3. Here's how we use a lot of this information, okay? Or at least what I did. I bought a Pontiac Transport. Look how they play on that word, transport. Transport minivan. I bought it in the name of an alien, which was a private trust, not a party to the state, not an office holder of the office of person. This was outside the realm of the state. It was owned by a private trust in Nellodium. All right, so with that, and with my understanding of certificate of title, if you look at your certificate of title, on the front it will say void if mutilated, right? Or do not deface on the back. It had those two statements, void if mutilated, do not deface. So what I did is I took my certificate of title, I bought it from a private party. The contract was in the name of the private trust, so the private trust was the owner. I took the certificate of title that I received from the seller. I took a big bold point black magic marker, a Sharpie, and in big letters from the lower left corner to the upper right corner and a diagonal, I just marked void. And I went over it several times, so it was very thick and unmistakable. The first thing you see is void across the face of it. On the back, I did the same thing with a magic marker, and I went canceled. I wrote canceled diagonally across the back. All right, so it was void, it was canceled, and I generated a letter. This was in Oklahoma at the time. I generated a letter. There they call their Department of Motor Vehicles the State Tax Commission. And so I sent them a letter understanding these requirements for registration and so forth that we're talking about. I wrote them a letter stating that this vehicle is no longer engaged in commerce. It is a private vehicle intended only for private use of myself and other associates. I say we are not residents of the state, nor are we engaged in any business within the state. However, we do work as missionaries for a church, and we spend a lot of time in the state. In fact, most of our time is spent within the boundaries. And I said Oklahoma State specifically. I didn't say the state of Oklahoma. And so my letter went on to say, in view of these conditions, we would like to register this vehicle to the state of Oklahoma per our understanding of the requirements. And I know full well what the response was going to be, but I wanted it in writing. All right? So I laid all this out. I created an affidavit of fact This is a private vehicle, not involved in commerce, da-da-da-da. I went down the list, and then I attached a cover letter, and the cover letter stated my intentions, and I was asking for instructions. Please advise me how to register this vehicle under these conditions. What is the procedure? And please reply to this address, da-da-da-da, and thank you very much for your cooperation. And it wasn't too long before I got the letter that I was looking for. On state letterhead, State Tax Commission, fancy letterhead, signed by a deputy director. Dear Mr. Emery, thank you very much for your letter, but I'm sorry to inform you that we cannot allow you to register that vehicle under those conditions. And I go, perfect. This might come in handy sometime. And it did. Okay, so I went and got written verification of that which I already understood, and what the idea was that if I was ever in front of a judge or any form of officialdom, that they would be trying to require me to do something that which was impossible, and the state had precluded me from doing what the parties might want to ask me to do, right? So the State Tax Commission gave me the exemption letter that I was looking for. That was perfect. I then went and registered the vehicle with a private, non-corporate, non-501c3 church, and I filed church registration certificate with the county recorder's office. So this then was a matter of public record. All right, and this could again be very beneficial if push came to shove down the road. All right, so that was done, and a few months later, I had someone broke into my apartment while I was sleeping and stole a bunch of stuff, including my car keys. I chased him out of the apartment, only to see the taillights of my van going down the street. All right, well, the van was stolen. Didn't have it anymore. Stolen with my Kingdom of Heaven license plates and all that. In fact, I did get this church does issue license plates, Kingdom of Heaven. I'm an ambassador of heaven. They issue all sorts of ID and registration documents from the church. And they believe in separation of church and state, right? So if you're not a part of the state, where do you go to get your documents? Well, this church provides those documents. So my car is stolen. I had an RV at the time, and I took off on a trip in the motorhome. And about 6 weeks later, I get my mail is forwarded to me. There's a notice from an apartment building complex where the thief had left the vehicle, and the apartment complex was going to sell it. What's the term? As an abandoned vehicle. They were giving me written notice that they were going to sell it as an abandoned vehicle that was left abandoned in their parking lot. And so I called the police after, they already had the stolen vehicle report. So I said, hey, here's the vehicle, go get it. And so while I was away, I was out of state traveling, and they went and got it, put it in the impound lot. And long story short, they were giving me a hard time. They said, well, no, the only thing you can do, this is not registered to the state. We can't release it from the impound lot until you have it registered with the state. And so I pulled out my letter from the tax commission, and they took a look at it, and they go, wow, well, looks like there's no way that the state's going to let you register it. And I said, so you can't force me to do the impossible. And so after reviewing the situation for a little bit and talking with supervisors, they released the car back to me. They recognized my private property rights, and everything that I had prepared for had worked perfectly for me. Other than the thing was stolen. I had to replace a couple of tires on it, get it fixed up. But anyway, it works. And here's a reference for you if you want to get more information on registration on vehicles and alternate ID and so forth. Really interesting people here at the Embassy of Heaven Church, and they've got a lot of information to learn from, tutorials and so forth. So you can pick up on that rabbit trail if you want, and go for that. All right, so there it is. All right, now here's what we did in the Law Club. Here's a different approach altogether. All right, we still went, we voided the certificate of title, filled out an affidavit, we moved it from the commercial to the private side, okay? But rather than registering it to the church, we filed an affidavit of ownership and status with the county recorder. And that affidavit basically states, again, this is a non-commercial vehicle intended only for private personal use of the private owners who are not residents nor persons associated with the state of Colorado, and so forth. Okay, so we got that all established. We filed that affidavit of ownership with the county recorder, got certified copies from the county clerk to have, and this will be our papers to show any traffic officer in a traffic stop. Okay? And we'd affix our own private plates just like you see below here. And this is what our plates look like. The numbers were bigger, much more like the standard plates, but this is just a representation I could do on the computer. All right, and we had our own metal plates done. We found some place to do that. So this vehicle is non-commercial and held in allodium. No certificate of title. It's allodial property, beholden to no one. It is registered as a matter of public security and public responsibility. There's no mystery here. The ownership information can be found registered with the Denver County Recorder in book number 154, volume number 12, page 313. All rights reserved, none waived, ever. Colorado Revised Statutes 4-1-207. Title 4 of CRS is the Uniform Commercial Code. And most of you know that 1-207 is a reservation of rights. We reserve all of our rights to private property and never waived. These were the license plates that we had. We were holding public meetings for our law club at the VFW, the Veteran of Foreign Wars building, which was just about a block down from the city police in Denver headquarters. And the parking lot would be full of these funny plates. And we'd come out quite often with, a cop or two or strange characters just kind of wandering around the parking lot making notes. A couple of times they'd follow one of our people off and try and pull them over in the street, and the person would pull over, hand over their papers. One of my friends, George, had his family in the car, and it seemed to be the cop took the papers back. He's obviously on the radio talking to dispatch, trying to figure out what the heck to do with this, obviously out of the norm. And finally, after some time had passed, George looks back and he sees the cop in the car just smashing his hands, his palms against the dashboard in anger and frustration. And he never came back with George's papers. He just turned around and took off. He was just frustrated. He can't do anything. The cop cannot do anything with these people because they're not a part of the state. They're not subject to the state, the corporate bylaws, the state statutes. They're operating on the private side. That's a different sandbox. They're not on the public side. Okay, so this is what we did. For whatever that's worth. I'm not going to say you should do it or not do it, but that's what we did, and it worked for us. Okay, so here's another idea. Here's a third approach you can take. You can transfer that auto, register it to a private trust or a business entity. Get it out of your name. If it's in your name, you're screwed. You're subject, slave, citizen, resident, all that. Okay, get the car out of your name. Get a private trust established. And here, be creative when naming the trust. How about a trust named Developmental Human Services? DBA DHS. Or how about, I like this one, Financial Betterment Institute, and then just have it registered as the FBI. Some counties require a form for a fictitious name, to file a fictitious name. And so if you have an entity that's operating in a fictitious name, which is not your own name, they require you fill out this fictitious name report for a business. And so you might check with the county, on business registrations to see what those requirements are. And if so, go ahead, fill out the form. Just fill out Financial Betterment Institute, DBA, FBI. And once you get your confirmed copy of that, you can then go out and do further registrations with the state on the vehicle, do your sale documents and transfer documents, just FBI. A friend of mine did that. His trust was FBI. Cops would immediately see that when he gave them the papers, and they just say, okay, well, I don't want to get messed up in that, so you just go have a nice day. All right, how about the Center for Intelligent International Assistance? I like Night Sightings Association, and the last one I actually did myself. I had a company, was involved in a company called the Independence Research Institute, and so I was doing business as the IRS. And again, let people make their own assumptions and presumptions. You don't have to explain anything. They look at that, let them make their assumptions and presumptions and carry forward, carry on. All right? So you can keep the car in the system, keep it in the state system. You might want to have some fun doing something like this. All right? So next thing is to position yourself as a tourist. We talk about that, right? Well, how do we do that? Well, where do you like to go for a vacation? Okay? Next time you go on vacation out of the country, do some advanced legwork. Find someone who can help you get a local driver's license in that place. When I lived in Costa Rica, I was doing a lot of conferences, and I would offer the service. One of my people would take people down to the motor vehicle department, and they could get their Costa Rica driver's license. And it was a real simple process. You take, the eye exam and fill out a medical questionnaire, like, you're not having a heart attack now, are you? And things like that, real simple things. And you'd end up having to spend some time standing in line, so it would take about a half a day usually. And they'd pay the guy, to take him down there, spend the time, pay him $100 or something for his time. It was good business for him. And they'd walk out of there, after a couple hours with their foreign driver's license. Now, when you do that, sometimes the country will want you to surrender your existing license, and I would request to keep that. It may come in handy because you're going to turn it in later. But try and keep it. If not, don't worry. What you're going to do is when you go back home, you're going to request a replacement for a lost driver's license, and then once you get that, you're going to cut it in half and send it in, so you don't want it anymore, and you're going to surrender it, okay? Because you don't need it anymore. You get off the databases. You're no longer a driver, so you're going to send that in, cut in half like a credit card, with an affidavit and a request letter to please terminate your status in the database as a driver, because as of this moment, you are no longer a licensed driver in the state. And you might just check and find out how long you might be on the databases if you ever do come off. Check on that, okay? So, and this is how it went down all the time, down on the bottom. Here's how it goes. Boy there, Mr. Godswell, I see that you're not a resident of the state of Colorado, and you're not doing business in the state of Colorado. This isn't being verbalized by the cop, but he's making silent judicial notice of these things, right? So, since you don't hold any of the requisite contracts that a local subject slave would, they can't hold you accountable to that. And so, gee, sir, well, tell you what, you just enjoy your day and have a nice day. And by the way, just slow down a little bit, if you would, please, next time you're in the area. All right, have a nice day. And this happened time and again with everybody who's had this experience, who's presented the papers in the right way. The car registration was not in their name. Their driver's license was from a foreign country, and bada bing, bada boom. No traffic tickets. Cops leave you alone. So this is firsthand personal experience. It happened time and time and time again. Okay? So make a note of that. Might be something to look into. All right? So let's get down to our final checklist to freedom. All right? And I've got a number of action items here for you. As I mentioned, you're going to surrender your driver's license. Cut it in half, send it in with a letter stating that you no longer are involved in commerce, number one. Number two, that you're not a licensed driver and you wish to terminate any such relationship effective immediately. Okay? Stop using your name and social security number. You can set up a business with an EIN. Set up a business name that sounds like a person's name. And you know many of these businesses. A lot of the fashion designers. Bill Blass, Carolyn Herrera, Yves Saint Laurent. You go right down the line. Set up a business that sounds like the name of a person. Get an EIN number. It's free from the IRS. You can do it online. All you need for an EIN is your name, social security number, and an address. Okay? Well, we're going to see here in a minute that hopefully you can move soon. And you give them what you have or give them what you can. And don't worry, because the EIN doesn't attach to the person who's applying for it. It attaches to the business. So you're going to get set up a business in the name of, something like Bill Blass. That's the name of the business. Sounds like a person. So now when you get a debit card from your bank, in the name of the bank account, the debit card is going to say Bill Blass. It's going to look like a personal debit card when in fact it's a business debit card. And some banks will actually put your photo on the debit card, and you can actually use the debit card with your photo and company name on it as a photo ID in the name of Bill Blass for certain situations. Okay, so that could come in handy. We'll get into more of this business type of structuring in the Escape the Matrix 8-week program. But this is what you do, is set up a business with an EIN and start doing everything in the name of the business. There's nothing that you can do personally that a business cannot do as well. New bank accounts, rent or buy property, sale and purchase agreements, utilities, phone contracts. You can do everything now in the name of the business and not your personal name. You want to stop doing business in your personal name. You want to transfer all of your contracts, payments, agreements, and assets. Get it out of your name. Transfer it to a business or a private trust or some other type of entity or individual. Whatever's appropriate for you. All right, but get those things out of your name and stop doing anything new in your name. You're going to stop mail delivery to your home. All right, that's a benefit, that's a direct tip-off. All right, you do not want mail coming to your home. Remove the names. If there's a name out front, remove the numbers. If you're at 709 Ajax Court, remove the 709, get it off your house. You're going to find a mail forwarding operation out of the country. Mexico, Costa Rica, Bahamas, doesn't matter. Mail forwarding options are plentiful. Mailboxes, etc. Works, in many countries around the world. All right, and you can have certain mail that you might want to have sent to you maybe once a month in a FedEx package. All right, but as far as everyone is concerned, if someone's investigating you and they go to the post office to find out, what your registered address is, they'll go, looks like he moved to Costa Rica. He's got his mail going to Costa Rica now. Of course, by now, you've already transferred everything out of your name, so all the things that you consider important and timely are going to your business, which has the mail drop in the local mailboxes, etc., or some facility like that. So all the things that you need current are coming to you now in your business name. You get that locally. Anything else that may stray that you didn't think about is going to your offshore mail drop. And I've actually had this happen. My ex-wife had some attorneys that were trying to steal a car. They had leased a car from her, and at the end of the lease, they were trying to trump up charges that she refused to pay because it was a scam. And based on those charges, they're trying to get a lien on the car. and steal the car. That was a nice Mercedes. And so they wanted the car. And so they were probably trying to pull some tricks on her, and they were trying to get her served. They were going to give a lawsuit and all this stuff, drag her into court, and they thought they had her framed to steal her Mercedes from her. Well, they went to the post office, and they found out that, she had this mail forwarding order with the post office to Costa Rica. And she was still living in the States, but based on that, they go, oh, crap, she's living in Costa Rica. Guess what? The lawsuit stopped right there. The shenanigans of the damn attorney stopped immediately. So, think about it. All right, the next thing is, if you really want your privacy, you need to move. Do all these things. Use your current address as needed, applying for your EIN and so on and so forth, and then move. And don't leave a forwarding address to your new address. Move into the new place in the name of the business. And I know that sounds extreme, and people get situated and they get emotionally attached to their home, and this is where they've, been with their family. And I know to many of us, this sounds like a real extreme thing. Well, how important is that emotional attachment? Aren't there other places that are just as nice, just as beautiful, maybe even more beautiful than where you live right now? And once you set up your international, your location-independent business, generating more cash for you, won't you be able to maybe move to a nicer place? The question is, how important is your privacy? How important is that? We're doing this for a reason. For your security, your privacy, your peace. If your guns are registered to your address where you live right now, you can expect a knock on the door. All right? You can expect visitors. So you've got to decide, how important is privacy to you? All right? So if you really want privacy, think about moving once you get your new business in order and things like that. You can build a location-independent business, take care of all your financial needs. We can help you with that. We've got a number of different options there. Then you're going to want to rescind your Social Security number with an affidavit and a notice, a letter to go with the affidavit. Okay? Basically, you were induced by fraud. Federal courts have determined in Throckmorton versus the U.S. that all contracts that were fraudulently induced are void ab initio. All right, so nobody can stand on a fraudulent contract that was based on fraud to begin with, and that's what the SS4 was. So that's your basis to rescind your Social Security. Well, so you say, well, doesn't that mean I'm going to have to give up my Social Security benefits? Absolutely, yes, it does. You don't need Social Security benefits. The whole idea is to get away from those benefits. Those benefits are the hooks that are keeping you sucked in to the realm of commerce and as a person that's controlled by the legislature. Get your business set up. You don't need Social Security benefits. Get other income set up. You're not dependent on that. So you've got to think outside the box. Eliminate debt. You're not going to need credit. You're going to start to operate on a cash basis. There's ways of establishing credit, if you really want, in the name of the business, and the business can work off of the credit. That's no problem. You can reestablish credit very quickly. All right, so we want to eliminate the debt that you have, and there's various ways of doing that in our more advanced programs. So you're going to want to set up a business where you can be a contracting party, which needs a secured interest in the assets of value. You've got a home, a business, other properties, other vehicles. You might want to set up some liens with third parties to secure the equity that you have in those things, and that's going to be important when we start challenging the debt, that always your equity will be protected. Okay? Action item 16. You're going to close the bank accounts in your name. Going to reopen in the business name. And preferably do it in a new bank where they don't know you. Okay? Might be that, again, you want to cut off the old links. You're basically going to cut off your old life the way it was and start a new life over again with everything fresh, clean, open, operating in the business name, not in your personal name, where you can have everything you had before and more with your new business and cash flow. Okay? And lastly, don't forget about your voter registration. All right? Talk to your polling places and voter registration people and see what you can do. Just cancel it. You know, you don't need that. You're voting for a failed system that's going down anyway. You're not going to help anything with your vote, I'm sorry to say. So that's it. Those are the 17 actionable items. You can do for yourself. You can do all of these. The question is, are you committed to privacy? Are you committed to your security? Are you willing to do what it takes? Or is this just kind of a frolic for you? And you prefer just to stay where you are and take on the risks as they come. That's something only you can decide. All right? So these are things that work. This is a path for you to follow. And if you apply what I've shared with you here, it will work for you. It'll take a little bit of time. It's not going to happen overnight. We take it one step at a time. But this works. And I'm a living testimonial to that. Okay? So these are interesting. They're powerful. They're very useful items that you can use. So lastly, we're going to talk about becoming an international PT. Planting your 5 flags. Are you familiar with this? If not, everything I've talked about so far you do in the realm where you're at, in your local location. We're not talking, other than maybe moving to a new house, we're not talking about leaving your area or leaving your family or anything else. In fact, you can become an international PT without going anywhere other than maybe to set things up. Have some nice vacations, right? Okay, so we talk about planting your 5 flags. This is a concept originally written about by, I think, Harry Brown, and then W.G. Hill wrote some books about this, which are very intriguing. And your flag number 1 is your citizenship. This is where you have your passport. So if you're a person in the Republic of the United States of America, the United States of America will be your flag number 1, your passport, and your citizenship. Flag number 2 is the domicile. All right, the domicile may be very well different. Let's say you've got that Costa Rica driver's license or Bahamas driver's license or, wherever you decide to get that from. That might be your domicile. It might be that you never go there. But let's just say you set up a foreign mail drop in the same place where you have the foreign driver's license. That could be your domicile. And once you get your driver's license, you may only go there every 2 years to renew your license. In fact, in Costa Rica, the first renewal is after 2 years, and after that, the second renewal is after 5 years. So the first renewed driver's license is valid for 5 more years, which is nice. So the domicile is where you appear to be from, but maybe you never go there. You set up a business. Let's say you want to set up a foundation of private interest in Panama, and so the business is set up there. The banking is set up perhaps in the Caribbean, could be anywhere in the world, Hong Kong, Chile. There's places where it's fairly easy to get bank accounts, but they do have increasing requirements in terms of residency and so forth, and there's ways of dealing with that. But the banking is always in a 4th jurisdiction, okay? You don't want to actually do business where your business is domiciled and also do the banking there, because as soon as someone gets upset with you, you've got problems and they can lock everything down. But if your business is set up under flag number 3, your domicile is in number 2, your banking is in a 4th location, and then you like to spend most of your time, let's say you're an active diver and you love diving in Belize, here's how it works, okay? When you're at home, where you have your citizenship, you appear as though you're from your domicile. because that's where you have your mailing address and your driver's license. Now, if you're doing business and someone at home gets ticked off at you, they have to go to the country where your business is to cause any problems for you. That's not likely going to happen. If they do, they're not going to get any satisfaction there because your banking is done in a fourth location. So they can't mess with your bank account because that's in a completely separate location. And then where you spend most of your time, you go on your diving trips and your vacations, everything else, your citizenship and domicile and business and banking is from somewhere else. So wherever you are, you appear like you're from somewhere else, and you have sufficiently compartmentalized your life so that for anybody to cause problems for you would require huge amounts of capital, time-intensive investigation, and cooperation from authorities that for probably such a small fish would not warrant the energy and expense required. So you see how that works? Okay? You've basically insulated yourself from problems. And you know what? Setting this up is a lot of fun, going around and traveling and seeing the world and exploring and meeting new people and having some wonderful new experiences. So you see how that works to your benefit. It's fun, it's exciting, it's an adventure, and it sets you up for life. Now, you don't need to be an international PT. If you accomplish the other items that we talked about, in the first slides, you're fine, okay? This is just taking it to an advanced level. And I would recommend this because, especially in the States, the shit is going to hit the fan, and you're going to want to get your assets and position yourself so that you can move around the world a little bit easily. Okay, I'm just telling you right now, you may not want to, heed my advice, but you'll remember that I told you this at some point in the not too distant future. So, what's in store for you? All right, no local residency or business. Hey, guess what? No jurisdiction, no forms, fees, fines, penalties, castigations, or commitments. All right, that doesn't sound too bad. No contracts, no obligations. No obligations, no penalties. No assets, no suits or seizures. No income taxes. Wow. Look at that. Look what you've accomplished. Okay, all of a sudden, there's a lot less worry, a lot less risk, a lot less stress in life. And this is real. All right, so hey, listen, I've spent enough of your time today. We're only just getting warmed up here. I hope you can tell. We're just getting warmed up. I've got so much that I want to share with you, and you're getting started. I'm sure you're thinking about some things you haven't thought about before, and we're going to do some things just like this in the next session, which is called Becoming a Previous Taxpayer. All right? I'm going to open your eyes on some extremely fun, simple, and effective ways to say bye-bye to the IRS forever. You with me on that? You're not going to have to be looking over your shoulder. You're going to learn to be your own private attorney general. You're going to be enforcing the law, not running from it. Okay? And there's an entirely different posture dealing with that. So you're going to learn to be free, and this is just... This is really an exciting adventure, and I hope you look at it the same way that I do. I'm living a testimonial to the effects and the success that these concepts actually can provide. You'll see my video channel here on vimeo.com/Mark Emery. I'll be adding new videos as time goes on, so stay tuned to that, and that'll keep you informed. So that's it for today. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope that you've enjoyed this information as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Put it to good use, and I'll see you as a private traveler. See you in the next video. Take care.